We heard from Will Fuller. We heard from Juju Smith-Schuster, which, by the way, Juju Smith-Schuster still is probably the biggest surprise in all of free agency to me. We heard from Allen Robinson. We heard from Chris Godwin, and we know the fate of most of the top wide receivers in the NFL free agency class so far. We were all waiting on one individual, a player by the name of Kenny Golladay that completely shattered our expectations for him from the moment he was drafted to this day right now, a wide receiver that had 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons in his first 4 years of his career, probably would have had a third if it wasn't for an injury. And it was between two teams, one of the teams being the Chicago Bears and the other team being the New York Football Giants, who was going to get Kenny Golladay. Well, we officially got word about who that team is. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here. And real quick, before we get to the content, take a moment to slap a like on that like button, consider subscribing and turning on our notifications, because we're giving away a piece of autographed NFL memorabilia to a subscriber that turns on our notifications. Just let me know in the comment section what piece of autographed memorabilia you'd like. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I'd like to catch you guys up on all the craziness that went down in the NFL today, and we're going to start with the Isaiah Wilson situation. Now, for those of you guys that don't know what's going on with Isaiah Wilson, pretty much him and the Tennessee Titans had a bit of a falling out, which resulted in the Tennessee Titans trading him to the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Miami Dolphins did their absolute best to help this 2020 first-round pick, who happened to be a left tackle, get his head right and try to put him in the best position to succeed for football. But after trading a 7th round pick for him and really doing their absolute best to help him, the Miami Dolphins had to cut Isaiah Wilson after efforts to help him have failed. And although a lot of people might be taking to the comment section to call this young man a big NFL draft bust, there is some things that, at least in my opinion, are significantly more important than football. You don't know what this young man has gone through throughout his entire life and throughout his entire career, and honestly, I really hope he takes some time to get the help he needs, because mental health isn't a joke. My prayers are with Isaiah Wilson, and I really hope he can figure it out, and maybe a couple of years down the line, if it makes sense for him, and if it is in the cards for him, maybe he'll return to actual professional football. I'm sure another team would be willing to give him the chance if he does get his mind right, and I hope he does. In addition to that, we have some interesting news that the Dallas Cowboys finally made a move aside from signing Dak Prescott. The Dallas Cowboys have officially signed former Falcons safety Keanu Neal on a 1-year, $5 million deal. This fills a huge position of need for the Dallas Cowboys, as safeties currently aren't commanding as much of a salary as you'd expect, and a minor investment in a safety that has been somewhat productive throughout his career like Keanu Neal could be a huge difference maker for the Dallas Cowboys, especially one that is already familiar with the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, who is Dan Quinn. Keanu Neal played for Dan Quinn during their time together in Atlanta, and honestly, it's really difficult to measure how good a safety is, so in this case, I'm going to be using Pro Football Focus. I know some people don't really believe in Pro Football Focus, but he had an overall grade of a 68.2 and a pass rush of 74.3. He had 83 solo tackles, 17 assisted tackles, 27 stops, 1 sack, and he missed 11 tackles, but came down with 1 interception and allowed a 97.9 passer rating. Now, bear in mind, he was on the Atlanta Falcons, so I don't really think it's fair to measure this man based off of his performance on a team that was notorious for having a horrific defense. I do think no matter who the Cowboys get, it still is an upgrade over who they had existingly, and honestly, a former 17th overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft will be a welcomed addition to the Dallas Cowboys defense. Now, finally, this is the part you guys clicked on the video for, I know that for sure, but I apologize because I really try to condense as much information as I possibly can in each and every one of these videos, because there's only so much voice for me to go around. So we all know that the number 1 wide receiver prospect in this entire NFL free agency class was a man by the name of Kenneth Golladay, a player who was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2017 NFL Draft, who really did a wonderful job making his way to the number 1 wide receiver spot for the Detroit Lions, eventually peaking in the 2019 NFL season, making his only Pro Bowl appearance, recording 11 touchdowns and almost 1,200 yards receiving. Kenny Golladay was the prime wide receiver in this year's free agency class. And after making a couple of trips to Chicago, flirting with the Chicago Bears, who the Bears actually offered something along the lines of a $11 to $12 million deal to him, eventually trying to hike up his own price, he has come to terms with the New York Giants on a deal. According to Ian Rappaport, here's the first tweet we get. Sources: Lions free agent wide receiver Kenny Golladay is picking the New York Giants, expected to complete a deal with New York to give quarterback Daniel Jones a top wide receiver. This is a big free agent off of the board. Now, you might be wondering, how much is Kenny Golladay getting paid? Well, this next part's going to be kind of crazy. Golladay is getting paid $72 million over 4 years, with a max of $76 million with $40 million guaranteed. This pays Golladay about $19 million a year, so this puts him behind Julio Jones and Amari Cooper for the 3rd highest paid wide receiver in the entire NFL. Now, obviously, when you make such a hefty investment in a wide receiver in free agency, you might be wondering if he's worth it. Well, the only concerns Kenny Golladay has is he was injured over this past year, but for the most part, every player seemed to have been injured over the past year because of COVID and lack of preseason games and training camps not being able to be what they truly should be. So I'll happily give him a pass for that. What do I think about this move by the New York Giants? Well, I think the New York Giants have done a remarkable job in free agency, taking a flyer on John Ross and investing heavily in Kenny Golladay to really be able to determine whether Daniel Jones is the guy for you under center moving forward. You already have a pretty good head coach in Joe Judge, which I personally believe in despite being a Dallas Cowboys fan, and you have Saquon Barkley, who is more than capable of picking up yards on the ground. Now, Ian also goes into a little bit of the drama that went behind the scenes of signing Kenny Golladay, saying that the Lions lock in a number 1 wide receiver in Kenny Golladay, paying him $18 million a year to do it. The Bears came on strong with a significant push, essentially a recruiting effort, but Golladay wanted the New York Giants, and the two sides worked on the last 24 hours to close the deal. Now, in addition to this, Rappaport says that I assumed that the Bears' visit for Kenny Golladay was to push Allen Robinson, but it wasn't. It was real, and Chicago went all in, willing to push money into future years to find space. But Golladay clicked with the New York Giants coaches and never left town until a deal was done. Now, if you're a Chicago Bears fan, this is obviously extremely disappointing because you have to consider the fact that Kenny Golladay clicked with the New York Giants coaches over the Chicago Bears coaches. So if we do a little bit of digging and try to figure out what that means, Kenny Golladay essentially chose Joe Judge, and more specifically, Jason Garrett, over Matt Nagy. So if you're a Chicago Bears fan, I think at this point, there is some cause for concern here. You aren't necessarily making the greatest decisions in free agency. You let your former number 2 overall pick leave your team when he just signed for $2.5 million. You have Nick Foles that is still owed a ton of money. Andy Dalton, which was signed to a 1-year, $10 million contract. You whiffed on Russell Wilson. It's not looking like a good offseason for Chicago Bears fans. And bear in mind, the GM that drafted Mitchell Trubisky is still in your front office. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this. But as a Cowboy fan, I think a wide receiver core of Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton, and John Ross, a running back, Saquon Barkley, and quarterback Daniel Jones, 2 tight ends, Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph, is a significant improvement on the offensive side of the ball. And if you're a Giants fan, you should be extremely happy. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.